We are a country that is broke, insolvent, and how do you pay back that debt? What do? You just, my mentor, Richard Russell, always used to say that, and this was 15 years ago, that the Fed is screwed and they have two choices: inflate or die, inflate or default, print or die. What about option number 3, find a villain? You incentivize these folks by weaponizing the dollar, telling Saudi Arabia and the rest of the OPEC countries, hey, we're going green, we don't need you anymore. And then you create massive divisiveness in this country. You create a situation where what it means to be an American, what inspired people, even probably like yourself when you were young, to dream of being an American is no longer maybe the vision or the thought that it once was. And you inspire this type of union that is being born. And if indeed they did make the switch where, hey, you know what, we don't like the prospects of a currency that is indebted as you are, with really no prospect of ever paying that back other than inflation and inflating away the currency, and you blur the metrics by which inflation is gauged, we're going to go a different direction. And if that indeed happens and the dollar gets globally dumped because they're no longer needed to be held or stockpiled, and they're losing value as some players start dumping, and then others, and then others, and then others, and all of a sudden the dollar starts to really get crippled and lose value, and they hit our shores, creating a massive increase in the amount of dollars that hit our shores because there's way more outside the country than in, as the stockpiling dollars to buy oil has necessitated that. The byproduct of that is spiked interest rates to the moon to compensate for that inflation, which then blows up not only stocks, bonds, and real estate and the dollar, but the banking system as well. And have no fear, Lael Brainerd is here. She's a modern monetary theorist who was at the Fed, who worked with MIT in development of the new central bank digital currency that Biden signed into executive order that ushered in FedNow, which came out a few months ago, which is Venmo or Zelle on steroids, backed by the Fed. She's a modern monetary theorist. So if you bring everyone down to their knees because everything collapses, and it was those sons of bitches who did it to us, they did it to us, how could they? And remember, where's the debt go? Who do we owe all the debt to? Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and government military pensions. That $100+ trillion is owed to us. Who's buying all the bonds that the Chinese are no longer buying, that the Japanese are selling, Saudis are selling, Russia has already sold? All of these countries dumping bonds. Who's buying them all? Well, yeah, that's us. The hedge funds and the investors chasing yield. So if indeed there really was a plan to allow this to happen, the majority of the debt that we owe is to ourselves. A whole hell of a lot easier to issue as a modern monetary theorist a central bank digital currency to us and make us whole by signing on the dotted line and taking that CBDC, which many of the people watching this show would say, I ain't ever taken that, until your bank blows up, your 401k blows up, everything blows up, and the federal government comes on at 6 o'clock at night and says, listen, we understand what's happened. We're very sorry. We're going to rein things in this country and be more protectionist of our own interests, and we're going to issue a new central bank digital currency. If you take it, you'll be made whole. Now, again, this is me trying to put all of these facts together and come up with a logical Occam's razor, call it, a logical outcome. But when the majority of the debt that we owe is to ourselves, it makes this whole situation a whole lot easier. And rather than pulling Bernanke and Janet Yellen and all of the former Fed and current Fed and Treasury chairs out and doing what happened to Marie Antoinette out in the town square, you can blame a villain. And that villain did this to us, inciting a rallying cry. So am I trying to connect the dots? Sure I am. But look at all of the facts that are coming or pointing to something happening. And I think it happens long before 2031, when we have to borrow every single penny of discretionary spending to do anything, including funding our military, which is supposedly the biggest in the world, and we're yet, blowing off bombs like they're gumballs. It's a situation that I don't think can last under the current path that we are on right now, and something's going to break, whether it emanates from the BRICS or from within, and whether it's intended or not. I think the day of reckoning is coming. In 1974, whereby for the protection of the Saudi kingdom and by extension OPEC, the promise was to value oil globally, price oil globally in dollars, and to recycle those profits into U.S. treasuries. And for that, that protection, then, the dollar would be the king. It would be every country on the planet would be required to purchase dollars or to stockpile dollars in order to purchase oil. And it has created a synthetic demand, in essence, for the past 50 years, and arguably has allowed us to live perhaps even above our due standard of living. And I think people need to understand that the fact that the dollar has been for 50 years the standard by which every country on the planet buys oil is an exorbitant privilege, and one that I think should be nurtured and clung to and not really be pushed away the way that this administration has really done a very good job at doing. I mentioned to you offline, I'm very fond of a term called logarithmic decay, which speaks to little by little by little by little by little, then all at once. It's almost like going over a waterfall where you see the pitch of the water starting to get steeper and steeper and steeper until you fall off the cliff. And, so I'm not saying that this is going to happen today or tomorrow. It could. But what I am saying is that we are witnessing little by little by little by little by little the chipping away at the dollar hegemony. I mean, let's look at the fact that, for example, every single OPEC country, all of them, are on the Chinese Belt Road and Rail Initiative, the largest infrastructure project in human history. Let's look at the fact that Saudi Arabia indeed did just join BRICS and was formally admitted 2 days ago. Let's look at the fact that Saudi Arabia did indeed join the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is the largest regional financial and military organization on the planet. And they joined the BRICS New Development Bank. You can see where they're going, but what became very provocative to me is what we are witnessing here right now. And that is they told the folks at the World Bank meeting earlier this year that, yeah, you know what, we are interested in listening to other countries who want to buy oil in other currencies. And this is a very, very big deal. And when you look at the coalition of countries, so you mentioned the size of the BRICS in and of themselves right now, it's growing in significance. In fact, this year alone, the BRICS countries are responsible for more GDP globally than are the G7. Just a little bit, but it's beginning and growing, as is their union. But when you put together these groups, the Belt Road Initiative, which as in and of itself is responsible for close to 75% of human population, 50% of global GDP, along with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Eurasian Economic Union, who the president of Belarus says needs to all join BRIC because they're largely the same countries with the same goals and ambitions. And you put that together with BRIC, you're talking the majority of human population, north of 85% of human population, the majority of global GDP, the 2 of the 3 largest nuclear arsenals on the planet, and the stranglehold on the majority of the world's natural resources, energy in particular. So yeah, this is a big deal, Michelle, and it's not one to take lightly as far as I'm concerned. I am a patriot. I am someone who represents the least likely character to achieve what I have. I came from nothing, literally 33 years ago, and my father and I started this company in a closet-sized office in Minneapolis. From nothing, but alone, from a friend who, my dad's middle name is Miles, his best friend who lent us some money is Franklin. This country has presented me more opportunities than I could have ever dreamed of. But I have to tell you that I think indeed we are heading down a very, very dangerous path. And when I see things, always have, I think, long before they happen, and I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist to put all of this together and see it. Now, what is the fuse that ignites it? What is the springboard or the impetus that makes that moment where countries forsake the dollar? I don't know what it is or when it is, but I will tell you, I honestly do believe that this is the ultimate goal. And when you put it into context with an administration whose, as we've talked about before, main economic advisor, his whole thesis, Jared Bernstein, is to lose the reserve status and look at weaponizing the dollar. Look, if the reserve status was so important to us, then why the hell would we tell Saudi Arabia and the rest of the world we're going green when it is the linchpin to the dollar hegemony, the petrodollar? But we're going green, so it's all right, you guys. We're going a different direction. And the countries that they are uniting with, which represent the majority of human population, are the ones that have all of the world's oil and natural gas and rare earth metals and all of the things that you need to build an advanced society. So it just doesn't make sense.
Right, and we've spoken about Jared Bernstein before. We'll cover that again. But before we do that, again, you make very, very valid points. Just as a counter argument, a lot of this is dependent on the leaders.
And when you look at the countries that have been admitted, there, as you mentioned, there's actually 20 countries that have formally applied and up to another 20 that have informally applied. Every single one of them has one thing in common for sure, and that is they are very, very rich in natural resources, in particular energy or the rare earth metals needed to make batteries or precious metals or all of the above, and also very, very, very tied into strategic shipping lanes like the Red Sea, like the Straits of Hormuz. And if these countries that are on the list actually do become BRICS members, they will control the Straits of Hormuz and the Red Sea, and they will control very strategic shipping lanes. And they have the new BRICS Naval Alliance, where a lot of these countries are banding together to patrol the Indian Ocean and perhaps ultimately the Red Sea, where, you have the U.S. Navy, who's been doing all of that heavy lifting for a while. But ironically, whether you're talking the Belt Road Initiative or you're talking the BRICS, I think the president of Iran said it best. He says the most important problem is represented by three issues. The first is energy production. Okay, they got that covered. The second is energy transfer. Okay, got that covered. That's the shipping lanes and whatnot. And the third is energy consumption. And when you talk about these three issues, he says BRICS has solved that. And they are indeed, this is their very methodical plan where they're doing it little by little by little by little by little. Look, Jim Rickards is a man I respect a lot, Michelle, and he made the statement this last summer that in the meeting in Johannesburg that he would expect two things to happen, both of which I agree with, mind you. One, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Eurasian Economic Union would join BRICS. Well, the president of Belarus is calling for a summit to do just that. Didn't happen in August. He got a little pushback. That's okay. The second thing he talked about was that they would issue a common settlement currency. Now, the difference between a settlement currency and a reserve currency is you can trade in something, but when you have excess, what do you do with it? So it's always gone into U.S. Treasuries, the most stable liquid market in the world, although that hasn't worked out so well for them over the last year or two. But the bottom line is simply this. I think that there will indeed, because that didn't come to fruition, so the finance ministers were tasked with going back to the drawing board and coming back to the meeting in Russia in October and presenting their findings. It will happen. After all, gold was reclassified the only other tier one asset in the world by the BIS in 2019. And lo and behold, is it a coincidence that the world's central banks, largely these countries that we're talking about, have bought more gold over the last 2 years than any time in central bank history? There will be a moment, just like the Russian finance ministers promised us, where they issue a common settlement currency. And I think it will be pegged to commodities using blockchain technology to show the veracity and the immutability. The head of the IMF, in the report they wrote right around the time that you and I had our interview in Vancouver, gold a barbarous relic, or gold an international reserve currency, barbarous relic no more, something to that extent. And then she came out a few months ago and said any central bank digital currency not pegged to something is fiat. Well, what would it be pegged to? And when you talk about could this happen in October in Russia? Sure, it could, absolutely. And I think the way that they would do it, because see, President de Gaulle, who drained a good portion of the gold from our treasury in 1970, 1971, proved that convertible currencies convert. So what blockchain does is allow the immutability and the veracity of which each country pegs to be there without having it convertible. In other words, maybe you peg 10% or 20% of each currency unit to gold held on the blockchain and audited by independent international auditors. You can do that if you are open and transparent and do it the right way. You still have the ability to transact monetary policy because it's not a one-to-one, but a small percentage, but just enough to tether it, because given the choice, politicians will do what all politicians have done forever. Even going back to Roman times when they clipped the coins. That's why there are ridges on the side of gold coins, because they would clip it and make it just a little bit smaller. You do that enough, you have enough to make more coins. Well, going back to the beginning of money, politicians will choose inflation over austerity. So yeah, I think this is how you give it credibility in a system that I believe has already lost a good amount of credibility, in fact, and is losing it rapidly across the globe. So yes, the marriage of blockchain and the marriage of commodities together inspires confidence. And that's why when people say, who's going to trust? Well, you don't have to. If you do it the right way and have it audited, have it transparent, and everyone pledges the same thing to the distributed ledger, to the blockchain, you got a real fighting chance. And you asked me when we were in Vancouver, well, what could the West do? And I brought up Kristalina Georgieva's report. And at that point, she hadn't made the comment. But now she has. And she said a CBDC not pegged to something is fiat. Well, how does the West maybe stop this? How does the West maybe pull up from this nosedive? Do that. Get some legitimacy and credibility back into this system, one that is lacking it and is lacking trust. And indeed, I mean, you talk cryptocurrency again. It's about confidence. If you have no confidence in whatever it may be, then you're waiting for a rug pull. You're waiting for something to collapse. And I think no one will drink the Kool-Aid ever again the next time around, unless it is pegged to something with transparency. Zoltan Pozar calls this Bretton Woods 3, a system that will be dominated by commodities and transparency. This is the way to do it without having it convertible immediately by anyone who walks into a bank like they could do back here when this $20 gold certificate was the same thing as a $20 coin. And it's funny because now it says in God we trust, but back then, before 33, it says payable to the bearer on demand in gold coin. So it used to be one-to-one conversion. I don't think you'll see that again. But what gold will do when it marries with blockchain is to show exactly what every country has in the union, pegged to the system, giving them equal say at the table, and using blockchain technology to show the immutability of it. I think it is what they're thinking, but I guess only time will tell now, Michelle.